Welcome back to Flight Path. My name is Simon. We are in the Huey, and we're over. I suppose it's Flanders. It's the eastern side of Belgium. We're heading to Liège at the moment from Brussels. This is the area that we're looking at. So we've taken off from Brussels in the middle here, and we're off to Liège at the moment, which is to the east. And the reason why we're going here is because this was the initial headquarters of Blucher, Prince Blucher, the commander of the Prussian army in 1815. And we're going to be looking, doing a big circle, going around, looking at the area that where the Prussians basically were encamped. So we were talking about the Prussian army itself and how it reorganized themselves prior to this part of the Napoleonic Wars. They suffered some defeats at Valmy and in the Jena campaign. And that made them have a whole rethink of their tactics. And I'm just trying to find where my notes have got to. So they decided to reorganize their army basically, and they had they reorganized on the French model, and this was basically to divide their army into a series of corps. They're like mini little armies. They have elements of cavalry, infantry, and artillery together, so that they can operate independently. They have their own little sort of supply routes, things like that. And what Napoleon had organized his army in that way, to being able to strategically allow them to move off, operate independently, and create scenarios which was advantageous for his main force. But the disadvantage of that style of organization was that if you didn't have the correct commander of those corps, then they tend to sometimes be a bit ponderous. They would be a little bit cautious. It depended on the nature of the person in charge, and they were unlikely to try to take too many risks and second guess their commander. In terms of comparisons, the artillery of the Prussians was probably just as heavy as the French, but it was likely that they were less nimble. The Prussian cavalry tended to be a little bit more lighter compared to the French. They were excellent. Pickets, reconnaissance kind of stuff, that sort of thing. Screening, I think, is the sort of action, really. But they weren't the sort of they didn't have the same equivalent of the French cuirassier with the heavy French cavalry, which were the sort of battering ram type cavalry. The Prussians as well never didn't really have cavalry or artillery in reserve. They were with their respected corps, and there wasn't really a reserve, not like the French. Now, the Prussian army did use conscription, so this wasn't popular, never is, and it also meant that the training of the troops was a little bit less efficient. The Blucher and Gnasna were familiar with the tactic that Wellington used with the infantry in a line. Now, that was all very well, knowing that tactic worked. You know, the use of a reverse slope, line against column, superior firepower, rate of fire, things like that. But the problem is, of course, is that the British infantry are regulars. They tend to be, they're volunteers, they're trained better, and the Prussians couldn't rely on their troops, their conscripts, to perform that maneuver. To stand in a line, a couple deep, facing a column coming towards you, and knowing that your firepower is going to win the day, is something that you couldn't ask conscripts really to do. So we have. So basically, if they did try to do it, they would probably find out that they would be routed before they could fire. Muffling, who was now I can't remember. Muffling is kind of like he's the Prussian. It's like an aide de camp guy. Did the Prussians win the Battle of Waterloo? Guy, man, you've gone way, way too far ahead. Jesus. Did the Prussians win the Battle of Waterloo? I mean, that's a spoiler, isn't it? It's not really a spoiler, but I will give away what I think, if you like. It's one of those things you're talking. It depends on who you read. The propaganda that the British made after Waterloo did kind of try to write out the Prussians from the victory. This is the German, a German victory. We spoke about a guy called Cyborn the other day, and he was the guy who basically tried to build a model of the Battle of Waterloo, and he picked the moment when the old guard reculed. And when Wellington saw this model, even though Cyborn had gone around and speaking to everybody about their memories and tried to sort of do a very, very good history of what actually happened, Wellington thought he gave the Prussians too much acknowledgement. And of course, Wellington at the time is a political thing. Was trying to be the it wasn't the Prussians, it was me alone. The truth always lies somewhere in between, and I've always thought it's one of those ones that I always like the line where Wellington stopped Napoleon, but Blucher defeated Napoleon. So Wellington will. It's basically without one. None of it would happen without both of them. but Wellington and that line, you know, the ridge, if they hadn't held out, then Napoleon had won. So Wellington stops Napoleon winning. Blucher means that he can turn that into an actual Allied victory. I think is where I would lay my my hat at the end of the day. But very good. But we are jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves on that. And we will look into all this. This is going to be a fascinating thing when we get down and gritty in the old helicopter like this. We'll be able to see and look at what they saw from their perspective, and we can look at the distances. This is why I like flying around in the Huey. It's a little bit slower. We get to see the terrain, and you get to see the distances involved at the end of the day. But thank you for that. So we are approaching Liège. We're in the Huey, and I thought we would do this because some of the Belgium terrain had become photogrammic recently. So Liège, here we go. I think as well that these little hills here, they don't really look natural to me. They look almost like they're man-made. There could be something to do with mining, possibly coal mining or something like that. You see them around Charleroi as well. If anybody knows if that's the case. But they do look almost like slag heaps, really. Then you see how the difference in, you know, it's not unless it's, I don't think it's anything volcanic, so it must be something like coal mines. So here we go. We're approaching Liège. This is Blucher's headquarters. In sort of May 1815, and this is the supply route back to Germany for the Prussians. It's in a little bowl. That's quite cool. This doesn't look photogrammic to me. It's quite a little dip into this basin of Liège. And it's got a river. Now, the reason why we're looking at these places is because the line of the supply line was very important, and we'll get to why when we get to the after the Battle of Ligny. Grouchy has given his corps, his group of men, the mission to follow the Prussians, and in the chaos after Ligny, there's some confusion about which way the Prussians have retreated, and even Wellington himself doesn't know where they've gone. And this is really important on both sides, because Napoleon definitely wants to push the Prussians back on their supply lines, but Wellington would hope that the retreat of the Prussians was more in parallel with him. And we'll see. We'll head back now to the campaign site, and we'll see that there was a lot of confusion at the end, and then maybe there was quite a few people going back along the supply line. But the Prussians managed to organize themselves, and they actually do head back up to Wavre. And it's important that we recognize that, because we'll have a look at some of the dispositions of the corps, and some of the corps, one of the corps wasn't used at Ligny, and that's the one who then could lead its way to Waterloo. So that was really important. We'll head now. This is Liège, lovely little basin. There's a bit of industry over there. And we're going to head now back towards the campaign area, and we're going to head now to a place called Namur. And this would be Blucher's more forward headquarters later. So, yes. Oh, yeah. I was talking about Muffling. Now, Muffling is this aide de camp. He's basically attached. I think he's attached to Wellington's staff. He's like the Prussian liaison officer. He tells. He wrote a series of passages. I think we find some of them in this book here, which is the Waterloo collections. He tells Wellington that, and I quote, he says, "Our infantry do not possess the same bodily strength or powers of endurance as yours. The greater mass of our troops are too young and inexperienced." And that is Muffling explaining to Wellington why they won't be using the line method to defeat the column. So, because they were not so confident of their defensive abilities, the Prussians tend to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. They tended to prefer to be on the front foot. It seemed to be that their style and with their quality of soldier was better for that. But they tended to be a little bit predictable. They lacked mobility, and they were kind of, I suppose, you could get them into a position and then they would sort of stick there. They were good in defeat, though, and this is important. Blucher had a very good ability to rally his troops after a defeat. And he would say, persevering, if often scrambled, clawed, and bit of its way to success. That's how he called his men, persevering, scrambling, clawing, and biting their way to success. That was the sort of feeling that you get when you listen to the Prussian and their mentality. They were heavy, they were lack of mobility, but they didn't see defeat as necessarily the big knockback that other armies might do. So yeah, because they were conscripts is the that nature of whether you have conscripts or not was important. And after the Jena campaign, they went into they instigated conscription, but the population of Prussia was a lot smaller than France. So it was something believed to be about 1 in 5 people in Prussia were called up at some point. They had a thing called Landwehr units. These were this is where the older men were called up. They were formed into these I suppose dad's army kind of stuff. They would be trained by regular officers, but they had that sort of hunting spirit, hunting kind of mentality. They could shoot, they could hunt, and they were formed up into these sort of groups. So they had a very strong national spirit. Let's talk numbers then. Actually, let's not talk numbers. Let's take a break here. We'll be streaming all day today. If you want to join in, please leave your questions and things like that. If you want to see anywhere, if you know anywhere that would be interesting to see, then just mention it in the comments. And if you're watching on YouTube, do the same. I will always give you a call out if you do that. Feel free to correct any thing you think I've got wrong. This is more of a discussion than a lecture. When we come back after this break, we'll do some numbers on the Prussian army.